Shabbat Shalom, you guys. This is Chris once again. I was coming back to you in part two of my journey into messianic Judaism. I wanted to tell you about the Sabbath study. I started watching Psalms 119 Ministries a while ago, and it was kind of burnt out on all the church teachings, all just religion in general. Um, so I don't know why I even came it up. It came up in my feed. Uh, but I started listening to it, and they went through the Sabbath study, which, of course, growing up in Christianity, you're always taught that the Ten Commandments are still valid, but the rest of the law is done away with. We shouldn't kill, we shouldn't steal, we shouldn't commit adultery, but we don't have to obey the Sabbath. And I always kind of thought that was kind of strange because I thought, well, if all these are still relevant, why don't we obey Sabbath? Which, growing up, you're told that every day is alike, it's all the same. Well, after doing more study on the topic, looking into the Roman Catholic Church, how it had been changed, actually, one of the books that I have is Reasoning from the Scriptures by the Jehovah's Witnesses. So I started reading that with all the evidence for it and with evidence from Psalms 119 Ministries again, and was really shocked at the evidence that I found. So I started just looking through the Word, Exodus 20, the Ten Commandments, Deuteronomy chapter 5, the Ten Commandments, and then it was later on in in Acts chapter 20, um, as far as how Paul was still on his way to keep Pentecost. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird because this is after the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua. So now I use the NIV. That's another study for another day at another time. But in Acts chapter 20, verse 7, it says, "On the first day of the week, we came through to break bread. Paul spoke to the people, and because he intended to leave the next day, kept on talking until midnight." Now, it's a whole study in itself, but basically they broke down the Greek and said that in the Greek it goes miatun sabbatun, which it means one of the Sabbaths. So I've depending on what type of Bible you use, I've realized now the more that I've studied translation techniques, the translation can basically come down to preference. Because if you get a Jehovah's Witness Bible, it's going to have their translation technique. John 1:1, in the beginning the Word was a God. And usually with a lot of other translators, it's just going to come down to how they want to translate it. So anyway, looking through the Greek part of it and also the rest of the text, it shocked me that Paul was still keeping the Sabbath even after the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua. And I thought, well, if the law is done away with, why is Paul giving one group of instructions to one set of people and another group of instructions to another set of people? Because Paul, growing up a Torah observant Jew, if you go to Numbers 15:15, it specifically states that all the same laws will apply to every person. The community is to have the same rules for you and for the alien living among you. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. You and the alien shall be the same before the Lord. 16. The same laws and regulations will apply both to you and to the alien living among you. So, I started thinking, because I'm not very well versed in the Old Testament, because of course the New Testament does away with the Old Testament. But the more that I started looking in the Old Testament, especially with Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 2, which is of course something else Paul would have known very well as he was a Pharisee, states, "Do not add to what I command you, and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of the Lord your God that I gave you, or give you." Now once again, going back to translation, commands, i.e. commandments. So, if Paul would have been taking away from the commandments in the New Testament or the Old Testament and giving him as far as in the New Testament, he would have been a false prophet because he had grown up with these instructions as far as the law. Deuteronomy 6:6 says to teach these to your kids when you go in and out of your doors. Deuteronomy 6:6. "These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them upon your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." So when you go to bed and you get up, you're basically talking about the law 24/7. It's a central issue in the culture of Judaism. I mean, that's just how it is. So once again, reading more and more into it, there's doctrines that I grew up not believing anyway. I didn't believe in the rapture. I don't believe in eternal torment, and I believe that there are doctrines that you can disagree on. Those being it. So the more that I started studying this, and the more that I started seeing the evidence that the law still in exist, I couldn't deny it, and I still can't. So that's basically the first study that got me into studying Torah more and being Torah observant as far as growing my beard out. Leviticus 19:27, 28. Um, there's other things as well that I'm slowly going along with. The Zeke seats, Numbers 15. So it's a process by process. Leviticus 11 as far as the food laws. So eating kosher is another thing as well, the second thing, because I started studying the translation of Mark chapter 7, where if you tell someone that you don't eat pork because it's not clean, they'll say, no, 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 Jesus made all food clean. Well, once again, if Yeshua would have went against the Old Testament, he would have been a false prophet. So if you look in Mark chapter 7, where it says in 19, verse 19, that by saying this, Yeshua made all foods clean. That's not in the text at all in any of the older manuscripts. Now, the NIV, the newer Bible translations will put that in there. The NIV, the NLT, the Good News Bible, God's Word. The majority of the New Testament or the new translators will do that, but in a King James version, it's not there. So when it's put there, once again, it's adding to the law because it's taking away as far as from what the law said of what was clean and what was not clean. And basically, all it is for our benefit, which that's another study in itself. But these are some of the main reasons why I now am Torah observant. I follow Sabbath. I follow kosher food laws. With later videos that I'll post online as well, there's many verses in the Old Testament that I couldn't reconcile with the New Testament, which now, as far as that I've started studying more Torah, it makes more sense. But as I said, that's another video for another day. So, comment, like, subscribe, put your feedback at the bottom. I'd be more than happy to hear from you guys. Have a great day. Shabbat Shalom.